All right, listen, honey, we have to have a serious talk about the traveling process of us moving from 2025 to 2026, and there is a weight limit on the bag policy that you can bring with you into 2026. You either pay the cost in the new year or you set it down now and you leave it behind. Hi, my name is Carly. This is Water Within Astrology, and we are here today to talk about the new moon coming up on Friday, December the 19th at 8:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please adjust your time according to where you're located on the planet. And we are here to discuss the ins and outs of the Sagittarius new moon. And this is happening on a Friday, which is a Venus ruled day. Venus is, of course, one of the benefic planets bringing good fortune. And funny enough, the other benefic planet is Jupiter, which is the ruling planet of this lunation. It rules over Sagittarius, and Sagittarius notoriously gets a rap about being the happy-go-lucky sign, the most optimistic sign, the sign that is always out traveling and always on a new adventure, always unafraid to take a risk or to act on its passions. And I'm here to say that all of that is true, and there's more. So let's get into it. First of all, this happening on the 19th is significant, I thought, because if you are into numerology, you know that 19 is equal to a 1, because if you add 9 and 1, it equals 10. Drop off the 0, that's a 1. And so this last new moon of the year is giving us a preview of what we are going to be having experienced in 2026. And as we know, and as I've discussed in my other videos, 2026 is also a 1 year. 2025 was a 9 year, and so 9 being a number that represents endings and completions. And of course, we also know that this year, 2025, was the year of the snake in Chinese astrology. And for those two to line up perfectly is kind of crazy because, the snake energy is associated with shedding its skin, with regeneration, with the Ouroboros, which is a snake eating its own tail, and that's a deep symbol. I'm not going to get too far into it, but essentially it's the snake eating its own tail, and it represents this never-ending cycle of life and death, this never-ending beginning and ending cycle, this circular cycle. And so 9 year of the snake was a year of shedding old skins. It was a year of ending old cycles and ending old patterns and really letting go of what we've been carrying for a long time now. 2025 was an unprecedented year for astrology because we had every single planet move into a new sign, and Pluto is a planet that only moves every 22 to 20 years. So for it to line up exactly with all the other planets moving into their new territories as well, which Neptune moves every 14 years, and Saturn, moving 2.5 years. Like, there's big gaps there that the fact that all of it has happened in 2025 is a true testament to how much we've been shedding and to how much newness is truly coming into our experience as a collective and as individuals. So in 2026, we are going to continue the process of having a new chapter start in our life. And 2025 was about ending the old. 2026 is about starting the new, like truly giving ourselves that whole year of 2025 to mourn what is lost and to let go what we have let go of, because that grief process is not just something that happens overnight. And if you have been someone who's been grieving all of 2025, I'd say you are exactly where you're supposed to be energetically. And I hope that you are giving yourself so much compassion and so much care, and I hope you're loving yourself more fiercely than you ever have before in your life. I know I am, and I'm still not done, right? Like, we're not done with this grieving process, and we're not done with learning how to love ourselves more fully, and we're not done with any of that process. So just know, if it doesn't feel like you're close to being done, that's okay too. But I will say that we have until February of 2026 to really give ourselves that permission to let go even deeper. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more as to why February is important. Without getting too far off track, we are going to come back to that one number of 19. December 19th is when the new moon is happening, and of course that reduces down to a 1. And so with this new moon, the start of a new moon cycle, and that's going to carry us into 2026. And whether you are someone who subscribes to the Gregorian calendar or not, I think, on some level all of us kind of have to. And on another level, we recognize that maybe that's not really what a new year feels like for us. And so wherever you are, that's perfect. But I think it doesn't really matter where we are and where we decide that crossroads actually is, whether it's December 31st or it's February, Chinese New Year, or if it's at Yule, if you're someone who practices those types of lunar calendar years. We're in it right now, and astrologically it supports this ending process. So the big players, first of all, we have a Sagittarius stellium in the sky at the time of this new moon. Of course, we know the sun and the moon are both in Sagittarius. That is what a new moon is when they come together at the same point in the zodiac wheel. And this is not just any point in the zodiac wheel. Of course, we have had a lot of lunations occurring at the final degrees of each sign throughout the whole year, once again reinforcing that endings theme for the year. And now we have the sun and the moon at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. If you don't know that there are 30 degrees in each sign, around 30 days to each solar season. So the sun takes 30 days-ish, give or take, to move through one sign. And traditionally that was the way the year was set up. And so there's 12 zodiac signs, and we also have 12 months, but we know that they don't exactly line up with the zodiac signs. And so with it being at 28 degrees, we are 2 degrees away from it being at the very end of Sagittarius. And when we have a degree point that is close to the end, as it is here, we call that an anaretic degree. An anaretic degree is essentially where the sign's energy is speaking the loudest, and it is driving that message home. And with Sagittarius, I believe that the message of the 28 degree point, or the ending of Sagittarius, is freedom, liberation, coming back to what makes us feel alive, coming back to that spark that never dies within us, coming back to our reason for getting up out of bed every day, what truly motivates us. And of course, with Sagittarius being Jupiter ruled, it's also a big player with education, and expansion is Jupiter's thing. But in Sagittarius, we find expansion through knowledge, and we find it through teaching, and we find it through classes, and we find it through, things that we're learning, and specifically more higher knowledge, and tending to be maybe more spiritual knowledge, going up and higher into those higher realms that a lot of people might not be able to meet us there. And that is where I think the teaching part comes in. It's like wanting for everybody to be on the same page, and for everybody to be up to date with what's happening in the higher realms. And essentially, if you've ever had that feeling of when you learn something new that totally blows your mind and it changes your entire outlook on life, you maybe have this desire to share it with someone else, and you have this desire to like kind of shout it from the rooftops. And after what we've been through in 2025, it would be really beautiful for you to share that, and to get up on your soapbox, and to share the wisdom that you've learned for this year, and to really understand that you have been through an initiation process with this year of 2025, and you are not the same as you were at the beginning of 2025, and you will not be the same after you begin this next 2026 year again. And every year we have this opportunity to begin again, and that is, I think, really highlighted by the Sagittarius energy at the end of the year every year. And we have an optimistic perspective on where we can go, how far we can go, and maybe we even push past any limitations that we had before, especially because we just had our Gemini full moon before this, which was all about annihilating and releasing any old belief systems that are keeping us stuck, that are keeping us from living our dreams, and that are keeping us from believing that our dreams are even possible in the first place. And I love the cheesy phrase, impossible is actually just I'm possible, right? It's two words, and it's all about that perspective change and seeing it from another lens. Like, maybe it's not possible because I don't think it is. Maybe that's the only thing standing between me and it being possible. So having a look and see if that's what's happening for you. But so the other two planets that are in Sagittarius are also big players here, because it is in the same area as the new moon. And we have Mercury and Venus Mercury at 10 degrees Sagittarius, and Venus at 24 degrees. So just 4 degrees away from that new moon, which is considered a conjunction. And Venus being that close to the new moon means that we are really looking at her. And of course, this happening on Friday, like I said, is ruled by Venus. So the Venus energy is coming in strong. And so that could mean we're looking at love relationships. It means we could be looking at how we are feeling about ourselves and how we treat ourselves, our self-care. How are we feeling about our lives in general? And do we have, maybe some rose-colored glasses on about our experience and whether or not things are working out for us or not? Maybe we're in denial of what's working and what's not. Maybe we are getting caught in the downfall of Sagittarius, which I would say is procrastination, or basically feeling scattered to the point where you can't focus. If you think about Sagittarius, it is represented by the centaur, which is a half man and half horse, and it's the archer. And the archer, of course, we know has a bow and arrow, and the bow and arrow, in order for it to be effective, is a tool that requires extreme concentration, and it requires for you to have one target, and it requires for you to take a moment of honing in on that target and for truly just like laser pointed focus. And then Sagittarius knows when the time is right to pull the trigger, and it hits its goal every single time as long as it can stay focused. And so, of course, again, with that Gemini full moon that we just came out of, maybe we were feeling like overwhelmed mentally, maybe overstimulated, unable to put down some of the millions of tabs that are open in our mind. And so Sagittarius now is like, if we haven't done that work, if we haven't given ourselves the permission to put down some things and to lighten our load, we might feel like we're a wildfire, like running wild and like burning out of control. And I think it's a good thing that we have Mars in Capricorn here at 3 degrees at the time of this new moon. And Mars in Capricorn is a tempered Mars, and it is a Mars that is grounded, and it's a Mars that isn't burning like crazy. And so if we, had Mars in Sagittarius like we did for the past month, we might have been feeling like that running wild. And maybe that Mars in Capricorn now is giving us a moment to like, whoa, what are we doing? What are we doing, and is it sustainable for the long term? Because Capricorn wants to go the long distance, and it wants to commit, and it wants to be able to sustain itself through long periods of time. And so it will take the less traveled route, but it will take the best route, and it'll make the decision that might be hard to make, but it is in the long term the most beneficial decision to make. So, with all this Sagittarius energy, we might be feeling like there is no choice but to just burn it all down, to start over. We're at the end of the year, we're looking back at the year that we've had, and we're maybe feeling whatever we're feeling about it, and we're maybe feeling like the best option is to just burn it down and just start over again, start fresh in the new year, new me. And the problem with that is, first of all, that's not a thing. Second of all, Capricorn is about creating a legacy for ourselves. And Sagittarius is sandwiched between Scorpio and Capricorn. In Scorpio, the soul traveling through the zodiac meets its own mortality and its own sense of mortality. And it comes face to face with the fact that all things end, all life is impermanent. Endings happen, disappointments happen, regrets happen. Those hard feelings exist, and it's not easy, and it's ugly, and it's painful, and it's like, and after what we've been through with Scorpio, now we're in Sagittarius, which is really the Phoenix rising energy that we sometimes hear about with Scorpio. But the Sagittarius is truly the Phoenix rising energy, especially with it being a fire sign. The Phoenix rising comes with Sagittarius, and we are able to rise again from the destruction of our own whatever we've been through, underworld experience. And now we have a new sense of optimism, and we have a new sense of it's not over. Maybe something ended, maybe something is ending, but it's not over for us yet. And we're not giving up that easy. And just try to make us give up now, right? Like Sagittarius has this kind of like, yeah, well, prove you wrong type energy, and it normally does prove you wrong. So because it has this mental tenacity of believing that it's going to hit its mark every time. Like, you have to believe that. And maybe you have to have a certain level of delusion in order to believe that. And that brings me to the Sagittarius new moon squaring Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, specifically squaring that Neptune at 29 degrees, right? In the past few videos, I've talked about Saturn and Neptune in Pisces because we had Saturn go direct around the time of the Gemini full moon. We now have both planets, Saturn and Neptune, slowly inching their way forward into the last degrees of Pisces, which Neptune is already there at 29 degrees. It's going to sit pretty for a little bit longer. I think it's the 26th of January that we are going to see it move into Aries, and then it's going to sit and wait for when Saturn moves into Aries as well. February 20th is the big day where Saturn and Neptune come together at 0 degrees of Aries and our new chapter begins. As you know, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and for these two planets to pretty much be conjunct and at the last degrees of Pisces for the entirety of 2025. And now in 2026, we are seeing just 3 days after the Chinese New Year, by the way, we have this new Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries beginning our new dream life, is what I keep saying. And because we have Neptune, which is the planet of dreams and imagination and possibilities and limitlessness, Saturn being the planet of reality, Saturn being the planet of reality, our dreams are becoming a reality. Or, on the other hand, we could be awakening to the nightmarish life that we have created for ourselves, and we are maybe feeling like that at this point, at the Sagittarius new moon, that our eyes are being opened after coming out of these retrogrades, and we can now kind of see where we've landed at the end of this year, and we are maybe feeling like this year has been a nightmare, and hopefully that awakening to the reality of things can bring us into a new reality where we don't feel like we're living in a nightmare. And so I think with this square to Saturn and Neptune, it could be a very rude awakening. It could be a moment where our rose-colored glasses gets ripped off. I think that's been a theme for this entire year. And it could be, like, how much of this delusion that we've been living in are we still clinging to? How much of it is actually like nourishing our soul? Because with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, it was about coming back to what is soul fulfilling for us. And with Saturn, that could be like our career, and it could be our public life and our work life. And maybe we're realigning our careers and our jobs back in alignment with something that's actually soul fulfilling. And after all, why wouldn't we want to live lives that are soul fulfilling and to work jobs that are soul fulfilling, that we can actually say, yeah, I believe in this wholeheartedly, and that's why I devote my life to this thing. And living from a soul-led place, maybe it's not your job that you're looking at, or that has been kind of like whispering in your ear all year about needing to change, and maybe it's something else. But with Pisces, we're learning about the interconnectedness of all things and of all of the universe, and we are maybe seeing that if we align ourselves with our soul in one aspect of our life, then there's a trickle-down effect, and we end up kind of having to follow suit with the rest of our lives and the other aspects of our lives about well, now that I've gotten soul aligned in this section of my life, now it's time to move on to the next one and to refine here. And, you know, that's a difficult and arduous process. And it can, yeah, very much involve deaths and rebirths and grief and all of the things, and labor pains and feeling uncertain and feeling like we don't have a plan, but we're going to just keep moving forward because that's all we know. We know that we have to. And, you know, maybe there's no logic to it. Maybe it's not realistic. Maybe it's not this or that. And we just are left with no other choice but to make a change. And I think with this North Node in Pisces year and South Node in Virgo, we are having to let go of needing a plan, of needing control over everything, of needing to have it all figured out beforehand so that it's safe. I think safety has been a big thing with this year with Jupiter in Cancer, but I think with the safety aspect, we are maybe seeing long term what is not sustainable and actually not safe for us to continue living this way. And, you know, like maybe our body is in danger. Maybe we're putting ourselves in places that we know are not for our highest good, and we are, you know, self-sacrificing with Pisces. Pisces has a tendency to martyr itself, and it can do this because it feels it has no other option than to lay itself down in the name of service to others, or in the name of the, you know, the potential unconditional loving nature of the universe. And, you know, like, I'm gonna be a martyr to prove that this exists, or like to prove that this is the true nature of the universe. And while that might be true, it is the nature of the universe, an unconditional, beautiful, mystical force that is actually working behind the scenes to get you what you want all the time, even if it doesn't seem like it, even if it feels like a setback or it feels like an obstacle. Believing that, but also knowing when it's okay to have boundaries, and it's okay to feel that you don't have to be the one to fix it, and in fact it's probably not possible for you to fix it. And I'm not talking about in a way of like, this is just a limiting mindset. It is totally possible for me to fix this. I just mean, like, where can we truly, like, come to terms with the fact that we have to surrender to certain things being out of our control, and that is the end of it. Like, that is it. And, you know, how graceful can we surrender control, and versus like how much are we clinging and like throwing a freaking fit about how it's not going the way we wanted it to, how we thought it was going to in our minds, how 2025 didn't go the way that we wanted it to. We had big plans, we had resolutions, we had this and that, we had to-do lists, and it didn't go the way that we wanted it to. And we have to just release the need for control over it. And we have to release the idea that it wasn't right, or that we failed, or that whatever story is playing in our heads, and know that and trust that 2025 happened exactly the way that it was supposed to for each and every one of us, and there are no mistakes. Like, I know that's a crazy statement, and I know that can definitely be taken too far, but can we truly trust that, like, we are being guided, and we are right on time for our soul's journey in this lifetime? I'm not ever going to tell you that it's easy. I'm not ever going to tell you that it's just as simple as that. It's never as simple as that. And, this transmission of trying to put into words the type of experience that we're having, which is in nature mystical and very ethereal and very magical and very just wow, and how do we put it into words, what we've been through and what we've got coming for us. I cannot express enough how much the lesson this year has been to trust and to come back into trust, and how fear only happens when we are not trusting. And can we learn to trust ourselves and to trust that we, no matter what happens, we are always going to have our own back, and we are always going to be able to figure it out, whatever happens. And we can trust that we ourselves are going to make the best decisions for ourselves, and no one's going to advocate for us the way that we do. And, letting other people make those decisions for us is a big mistake, and allowing other people to tell us what's best for us despite what we know to be true for ourselves is a big mistake. And, how are we supposed to trust anyone else if we don't even trust ourselves? And I think, Aries is always about the self and about the relationship to the self and about knowing our needs. And this year we found out perhaps a lot of what doesn't work. And now we are going to move into 2026 knowing what we will not settle for, and knowing what we want our lives to look like, realistic or not. Like who's deciding out there what's realistic or not. I think it's more important for us to ask ourselves what is in our control and what is not. Because with this Pisces energy, we have struggled with boundaries. We have struggled with knowing what is ours and what is someone else's, because our empathy, especially with Jupiter and Cancer, our hearts probably grew 3 times the size that it normally was. Like hopefully we were opening to deeper sense of empathy with all beings and all of life around us. And I know, just looking back at the big things that happened in 2025 and about how so many beautiful people were out there advocating for the war across the ocean, the wars that happened thousands and thousands of miles away, and the horrible things that were honorable to advocate for. But at the same time, were they things that truly we had any control over? Like as bad as that sounds, like I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm saying awareness is really amazing and wonderful, and like trying to understand this really complicated situation that has been going on for generation after generation after generation, and for us to all bring that into our consciousness and to work to understand that, because we're coming from a place of empathy, because we care about people dying and children being starved and bombs and whatever else. And, yes, we should know about these things, and we should feel for them, and we should love those people far away, and we should do what we can to try and bring awareness to the issues and to bring an end to the violence. But at what point do we come back into our own boundary, sovereign self? And when do we come back into really differentiating between what is not mine to carry and what is? Because I think a lot of us took on a lot this year. That's just one example of things that weren't necessarily, first of all, in our control, second of all, ours to care for. And, I don't mean don't care. I don't mean don't have empathy. That is not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying, how many of those battles that we fought this year were not our battles to fight? And being caught between that feeling of like needing to differentiate and be discerning, right? That's the Virgo South Node. It's like we haven't been very discerning about what we let into our energy field. And then we also have the Pisces energy, which is like empathy for all beings and everything, and we're feeling everything, and there's no boundaries, and there's no limits, and no labels, and no nothing. It's just ethereal oneness, like, yeah. Universal consciousness. And yes, I think we need both. That is what the zodiac teaches us about the balance between the signs and the axis between the signs. And, of course, Gemini and Sagittarius is about, Gemini kind of has this tendency to be the jack of all trades and master of none. Sagittarius is where we become the master, and we become the ascended teacher, and we become that that wisdom keeper. Because, not saying that's not possible for Gemini, I'm saying sometimes Gemini will struggle to follow through with its like starting something new, but then it gets distracted and goes over here and starts something new, and blah blah blah. It goes on and on. And then with Sagittarius, it has to overcome that, and it has to stay in that laser focus, and that's where it gets the mastery. That's where it attains mastery. And, that's not something that happens overnight either. And with this square to Saturn and Neptune, it's like, when are you gonna figure out that this is a long distance run? Like, this is not just a new moon, full moon, one and done. Like this story of astrology that we're weaving together as a collective, and that we check in every 2 weeks about, it doesn't end after this video is over, or after the full moon comes to a head, or whatever. It is a continual story and lesson for us to continue to move through. And the more we pay attention to what's happening energetically, the more we can start to catch on to what it's really trying to say and work with us through. And so that is that. There's a lot to be said about this new Saturn and Neptune situation. I want to ask each and every one of you to reflect, either in the comments or with your own personal journaling exercise, during this new moon, about what has changed for you since 2011, when Neptune first moved into Pisces. And since 2011, Neptune deals with the spiritual realm, for sure. And it deals with a higher octave of love. It's the higher octave of Venus. And Neptune wanted us to, this year, go farther than we've ever gone with it. And, I think in Scorpio season, we were asked to kind of go into those more uncomfortable realms that our spiritual practice can sometimes take us into. But without going into those places, our spiritual practice is actually empty. And it's actually spiritual bypassing, and it's actually just performative, and it's actually just whatever, and spiritual bypassing is a big one for this Pisces Neptune Saturn situation, because it's like Saturn is also the planet of responsibility. And like, where do each of us have a spiritual responsibility to act in ethical and moral ways that, you know, not only doesn't harm us as individuals, but doesn't harm other beings as well. And that is something that I think a lot of us are missing right now. And I think that is what we're being asked to refine about our own personal ethical beliefs, our own morality, our own sense of spiritual existence, our own Christ consciousness, if you will. Of course, it's almost Christmas, so there's a lot coming up for this end of the year. And there's, you know, especially with Neptune getting ready to move into Aries, we're really looking back over our shoulder and seeing how far we've come since 2011. And for me, it's been like 2011 was when everything changed for me. And there's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's like so obvious to me when I look back at 2011 and who I was then, and the decisions and choices that I made to end huge cycles for myself and my family lineage and my spiritual world. And now, you know, 14 years later, being someone who can look back and say, like, that was one of the best decisions that I ever made for myself, but that doesn't mean it was easy. It was so difficult, and there are still difficulties that are lingering even after 14 years. And, you know, there's still like this murkiness around it too, especially with Pisces. It's like I still haven't been able to fully come to a definition of my spirituality, which is what the whole thing was in 2011. It was like I left the church that I grew up in, and now there's been all these questions, and there's been all these, you know, whisperings and whatever, unspoken conversations, or rather like behind the scenes conversations that weren't direct or weren't face to face, about who I am now, what I believe, you know, am I a Satan worshiper, like what is going on with Carly, and, you know, she's not a Christian anymore, but what is she? And like now I'm still at a point too, like I said, where I haven't been able to put a solid definition on anything, and I don't think I will be able to, maybe ever. But, you know, I think once Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, there's going to be a lift of the haze, and there's going to be maybe some, you know, Aries wants to prove itself, and Aries is like, I'm just going to bust through the door, and I'm going to be this strong, like, commanding presence, this, like, direct energy, as Sagittarius also is, right? They're both fire signs, and they both, if you think about the symbols, Aries is the goat, and he has the horns that's able to smash through and to be direct and to, like, come in strong and to just, like, boom, here I am. Sagittarius has this bow and arrow has this penetrating arrow at the end of it. It's like, pew, pierce through the heart. And, you know, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And neither of those have to be a bad thing, you know, but there is a penetrative, masculine, doing energy around these two fire signs. And as all fire signs and air signs have that more masculine, penetrative energy. Penetrate, yeah, I said it. So, and that's what 2026 is going to be, because it is the year of the fire horse in the Chinese astrology that we'll see shifting on February 17th, just a few days before the Saturn and Neptune move into Aries. And right now is the fire horse, right? Centaur, horse, fire, Sagittarius. And what I think 2026 and this new moon are both going to be about, what gets us out of bed in the morning? What is the reason we continue to do this thing called life, this life that we signed up for? Like, what is our mission? Especially because with Mars in Capricorn, it's giving us like a preview of the Capricorn stellium that's coming up at the end of, it's actually going to be at the end of 2025 that we move into the stellium. And then a good portion of January 2026 is also going to be Capricorn stellium, which if you, shout out if you know anyone with a Capricorn stellium, because I swear to God, this stellium haunts me. It's wild. And I know, you know, like it's just about like a certain age group has that stellium, probably from like 1991 to about 1994, you know, around there. But it's not consistent, right? I'm born in 1993 and I have a Scorpio stellium and I have, you know, 2 planets in Capricorn. But anyways, it's all like really interesting when I start to look at the patterns of like, okay, my Scorpio stellium maybe is seeking out this Capricorn stellium to balance it out, right? Because Capricorn is another sign that is able to go deep like Scorpio is. Scorpions can burrow down into the earth and go underneath the surface, and Capricorn is the hippocampus, which is a mystical being, just like Sagittarius, but it's half goat, half mermaid, or half fish. And so it's able to climb that mountain the way that Capricorn, you know, normally gets seen as like this goat that's able to climb the mountain. But I think sometimes we forget that Capricorn is also capable of going into the water as well and going a little bit lower. Now, what Capricorn lacks is going deep into the waters, right? It can go into the waters, but its head is still a goat. It still has to breathe air. And so it prevents the hippocampus from being able to go too deep for too long. And I think Capricorn finds safety in the reality realm, right? Like not so much, yes, the mystical realm, because it also is a very deeply mystical sign. It's more about the wild aspect of life. Like think of the god Pan and how he was a party god, you know, he was out there just like hanging out with Dionysus, the god of wine, and like just hanging out, playing his flute, having a like perpetual party. And, you know, the flip side of Pan is panic, and that's where we get the word panic, is like Capricorn can sometimes get caught up in panic because it has a relationship with a lack mentality. Capricorn is the deep winter, right? Like it's the Capricorn season begins on the winter solstice, the 21st of December, just 2 days before, or sorry, after this new moon. And with it being this part of the year where there is no life, there's normally snow, it's cold, there's no life growing, and, you know, maybe our harvest that we had back in Virgo season is starting to deplete. Maybe we're starting to look at our storehouses and they're starting to go down, and we're starting to maybe start to freak out a little bit about our resources and our financial stability, our home stability, and things like this. So, anyways, that is Capricorn. Capricorn is responsibility. If we're going to take one word away from Capricorn, it's going to be responsibility. And like I said, I think we all are coming to terms with how we each as individuals have a responsibility to live a certain way, to do our best. That's all we can do. And to get real with ourselves and ask ourselves, like, are we really doing our best? Is there more that we could be doing? But at the same time, you know, Capricorn has this tendency to not honor how far it's come and to not give itself any acknowledgement as to all the hard work that it already has done. So we want both. And I think it's, you know, Sagittarius is more about that energy that's like, I'm celebrating, like I've come out of this dark underworld journey with Scorpio and now I'm back on the surface, I'm back on the horse, literally. And, you know, I'm able to get back at it in a new, more rejuvenated, like fiery, passionate way. And hopefully be like realigned with what was out of alignment in Scorpio, because that's kind of Scorpio's thing. It's like it's gonna like bring you back into alignment with your soul, and sometimes that can be really uncomfortable and really painful. So, new moon at 28 degrees, conjunct Venus in Sagittarius. Venus in Sagittarius wants a love that is not lukewarm. It wants a love that is passionate and on fire and invigorating and adventurous and exciting. You know, I think excitement is the word for 2026, and I think we can kind of maybe have a general question for ourselves going forward from here at this point, new moon. Maybe this is an intention you could set, is to start to approach your life in decisions that you make around asking yourself, does this excite my soul? And like, you know, another way of phrasing that would be like, is this a full body yes? If it's not a full body yes, then it's a no. And if it's not, you know, something that truly excites me, because excitement is the highest vibration. It's even higher than love. It's even higher than authenticity. Excitement is what happens when our soul comes face to face with what it is meant to do in this lifetime. If something excites us, our level of excitement is a gauge on how we can see if this is in alignment with our soul. And I think that's really awesome to just kind of have that like rule of thumb. Like, does this excite me? If not, you know, and I realize we can't just like always do things that excite us. We can't always just do things that make us happy and bring us pleasure. I know that Capricorn is like, actually you have responsibilities and you got chores and you got this, and maybe it's not exciting, but it's gonna help you in the long run. And we're caught between those two. And I think the bottom line is to realize that whether or not you are actually traveling anywhere, with Sagittarius, we are always talking about going on a new adventure, traveling to foreign lands. You know, maybe you're traveling for the holidays, maybe you're not. One way or another, we are all traveling from 2025 into 2026. And like I said, you have a weight limit on your bags that you can bring with you into 2026, and it is high time to get rid of the old. I think with Virgo South Node, we've been purging so much, and we have been letting go of like all this dead weight, and whether that's physical or non-physical, I think it's both, and I think it's as without, so within. And you know, the more we can maybe start to get rid of things in our physical world, like letting go of old clothes or, you know, movies or books or whatever it is, and then we get into, you know, we kind of like work from the outside in, and we start to refine what we know emotionally and energetically cannot come with us into the new cycle. And I think as a collective, if you want to get really real about it, we are letting go of, I would love to say that we're coming to the end of an era with our belief systems with Neptune and Pisces, and about how we've been in delusion as a collective around what a lot of us have identified as religion or spirituality or whatever. And I think we're kind of at a crossroads as a species with, how long are we going to play this Christianity thing out? How long are we going to cling to that? Like, in a way that all the holes are there. Like, all the things are being illuminated. All the, like, unsavory aspects of this love and light only religion, but also fire and brimstone religion that has been a indoctrination of shame on the collective, and indoctrination of servitude and being a martyr. After all, that's what Jesus was. He was a martyr, and he paid the ultimate price for us. And what did we do to him? How have we repaid him? And like looking at where we are 2025 and seeing the state of affairs, and not to generalize anyone, I'm not saying all Christians are like this, but in the general population, we are absolutely seeing huge contradictions in the belief systems that people are said to be prescribed to, and the way that people live their actual lives on a daily basis. And, the cognitive dissonance is so real, and I'm not here to do a crash course on why Christianity is a really toxic and horribly demoralizing belief system to subscribe to. That's coming from someone who was brought up in the church. My dad is a pastor, continues to be to this day, and there was a lot of indoctrination in my individual family life as well as the church as a whole. And I know everybody's story is different. This is my story, and that's why I'm sharing this, is because in 2011, when I decided to, I never even made that conscious decision, actually. It was just like this flow of change that found me, and I just was like, okay, I guess I'm going this way now. And, over time, it was like, okay, so yeah, I did leave that church, and like, that was a good idea. That was a good thing that happened. Like, and it felt so organic, and it felt so like not even a conscious decision. It felt like it was like I was just carried through that transition. And, now looking back, I'm looking at how I was always protected by the Most High and the divine source that I do believe exists, and I do believe is, inhabiting every morsel of this godforsaken, inhabiting every morsel of this beautiful and reckless life that we are all living together. And I realized that even if I let go of the label of Christianity, that doesn't mean I was ever separate from that divine source. And just because it got a new name doesn't mean it wasn't always the same thing. You know what I mean? And it was just a perspective change, and it was just a name change, and it was just like, now in hindsight, looking back and seeing, like, I was always being carried, and there was always a divine plan at play. And even now, I believe that this source is guiding me into the new practices, into this new life, and I believe taking me higher and higher into what I guess you could call a spiritual awakening, a spiritual journey, a spiritual whatever. It's my spiritual journey one way or another. You can call it what you want. But I believe that I am truly being taken care of at all times, in all ways. And I have not been abandoned, and I have not abandoned the source. And this is not me sharing this just to like prove anything. This is just me being truly honest about what the experience I'm having is. And so maybe those rose-colored glasses are coming off around us realizing that Christianity has always been bullshit. And it's always been built on the backs of pagan holidays, holy days. And it's always been this thing that took old traditions and it took that and it renamed it and it, and maybe we can take solace in knowing that even if we celebrate Christian holidays and we do it that way, it's not that different than what it always used to be. And whether or not you want to go back to those ways or not, I'm definitely not going back all the way to those ways. I'm living in a new modern way of honoring the old ways. But, knowing that it was always just a rebrand, like paganism was rebranded into Christianity so that people wouldn't go too crazy into an uprising and be like, you can't take away our traditions and our this, just the same way I imagine Christians would be acting now if that was ever to become a thing. So, I think it's really interesting how we see the cycle spinning and we go back and we can see the patterns and, really truly zoom out far enough to see the big picture and to see like what is really going on here. Like, was it always just about control? Was it always about, getting to a point where we were able to indoctrinate people with these shame thought patterns? And, was it always about, it wasn't always about that with paganism and with the worshiping of the sun, which is essentially what paganism is realizing that it's within you and that as without is so within. And the seasons of nature around us are a reflection of the cycles that we move through in our own lives and our own internal lives. And so anyways, not to get too into it, but since 2011, learning and unlearning everything that I have been through is really like, whoa. Like, it feels like another lifetime. And it feels like, I'm just so grateful for taking a risk the way that I did. Even if I didn't know I was taking it, I did, and I trusted, even though the steps were not in front of me, I trusted, and I made those changes, and I made the decisions, and I continue to make those decisions. And I would continue to make these changes as many times as I need to. Now that I've changed once, I have the confidence to change anytime it's needed, because that's how I would rather live my life, is to not contribute any more to the cognitive dissonance epidemic that we have ourselves in, but to actually change according to the new information that is brought into my life and to change according to where that's required. And I think, a lot of change is coming. And I think a lot of people are going to go kicking and screaming. And I think this awareness of the change coming is going to be giving us a foot up on the ability to be open-minded and to go willingly, or to rather just surrender to the flow. Because the earth has been asking us all of 2025 quite loudly for us to please make a change and to realize how unsustainable the lifestyles that we live are, and how selfish we have been, and how empathy is one of the most needed and, admirable qualities in humanity. one more thing is that Mercury just finished clearing its shadow period on December the 16th. So today is December 16th, the day I'm recording this, and it's Tuesday. Maybe there was something that you needed to say to somebody. Maybe there was some forgiveness or some hard conversation or whatever that just needed to be communicated, and that retrograde with Mercury moving through Scorpio and Sagittarius took you to the depths and then took you back to what your truth truly is. Sagittarius is truth. It's shooting its arrow for truth every single time. It is seeking truth, and it is unafraid to seek that truth no matter what happens, because it's been through the underworld. It knows it can handle it now. And now maybe our fears have dissipated and we're able to have that conversation that we need to have. Even if it's just writing a letter to someone that you never send, I think that would be really helpful. And, let go. Just really give yourself that permission to let it go. Write it down and burn it. Write it down and, bury it in the ground. Whatever you need to do. I'd say with Sagittarius fire, burning it would be a really wonderful thing. For the Gemini full moon, I wrote down all my limiting beliefs, and then on the other side of the paper I wrote down the beliefs that I want to change those into the alchemy that is taking place in my mind and in my mindsets. And I burned that, and it was really cathartic and really wonderful. And so doing that now, or doing any other types of rituals, this is the last new moon of the year. Maybe you're someone who likes to do rituals for the solstice, the longest night of the year. Maybe you're someone who wants to honor Three-Eye Atlas, because up to this point, I have not really said anything about Three-Eye Atlas in my videos because I don't know anything about Three-Eye Atlas, and all I can say is that duh, of course 2025 bingo card had some unknown foreign cosmic object coming into our orbit and coming close to the Earth. It's going to be closest to the Earth on the 17th. That's tomorrow, Wednesday. And then we have the new moon on the 19th. And so there's just like this, and the 21st is the solstice. So there's just like this big kind of portal that we're moving into. We're already there. And, it would be great time for people to kind of just like tune in and notice any subtle changes that they might be feeling from Three-Eye Atlas. I know I've just been like on one and struggling with my coping mechanisms with Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces, struggling with figuring out how to feed myself actually, because nothing sounds good, but I'm hungry and I am feeding myself, but even the food hasn't turned out very well. Anyways, this is struggling to be in this human body, kind of. Sleep has been crazy. It's just been especially since that Gemini new moon, it's just been what is going on? And the, pulling of the toolbox and the tools is really important right now. So sitting in meditation, doing your affirmations, doing the regularly scheduled self-care. We cannot afford to miss that now at this point. And the more we practice that, the more we are able to feel those subtle changes within ourselves. So maybe just taking note of how we're feeling with this Three-Eye Atlas energy. And then we can all come together later and be like, what was that? What'd you get out of that? Let's talk about it. Because, what is going on, guys? Okay, so there you have it. We have so much more to be said about this, honestly, but I'm going to leave it there because I've talked for a long time and I have gone on many a tangent as I do. And so now it is time to draw our rune. Give me this. See what rune we need to have out on the altar for the Sagittarius new moon. And I've been playing with this experiment where I carve my sigil that I think is most connected to the energy, and I carve it onto the candle, and then I pull a rune, and if I get the same one, it's like, you win! And so anyways, it's not like a win or lose. It's probably just revealing to me more of what might be a little bit more obvious. Anyways, we're gonna pull this one. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. So this one feels like a combination of Pisces and Capricorn, to be honest. It's the Awas, which actually feels like the name from Avatar, like Awa, the spirit tree or the spirit mother. And it also means, in the rune definition, Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life. Yes, I'm learning. It's also related to the yew tree, and it's related to dreams and strength and stability. So the dream aspect is the Pisces vibe that I'm getting, and then the strength and stability is the Capricorn energy that we're moving into. And I think that, that's really great. The Yggdrasil is the tree of life that is this whole symbol of like interconnectedness with all beings, and this tree that we all come from and that we all return to, and very Piscean, but also very Capricornian, right? In the earth energy way. So now we're going to pull a card from my Adventure Time Tarot from Catherine Hillier. She is amazing. She handmade all these cards, and if you are someone who is an Adventure Time fan, which I am a super freak fan, of course we had to choose Adventure Time for Sagittarius because Sagittarius always wants to go on an adventure. And if you know the show, then, and the tarot cards, you can look at how she chose the different characters on the cards, and they are totally related to the meanings of the cards too, and it's really cool. Like if you know the backstories, to be like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. So I'm gonna do my best to explain here, and let's first asking the Adventure Time Tarot what card we need for this collective reading here on YouTube. Which adventure are we going on as we begin this Sagittarius new moon? What adventure is in store for us? Okay. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. We got the card. We got the Three of Swords. And that's really crazy. We also have the Empress at the bottom of the deck, though, so that counts. Cool, I know these ones, which means I'm learning. Three of Swords, I got intimately connected with during 2024, where I was experiencing really deep heartbreak and really coming to terms with how painful it was and how much wounding was lingering there in my heart space. And so I made a 3 of Swords painting that made me realize the true meaning of the card. And the true meaning of the card is 3 swords have penetrated a heart. And the heart is not bleeding. And with the 3 of Swords, it represents an old wounding. Something that's maybe been going on since 2011 or even before that. How much of that wounding have we kind of just like been living with and figured out how to live with it and how to keep going even though those swords are still there? And can we heal that deep wounding? Because that's like the core wound. It's like maybe other things are covering up on top of that, trying to act like they're the real problem, but it's actually like this deep core wound that is the problem that causes other things to happen and causes us to act in certain ways and whatever. And with 2025, I was able to truly come to terms with how much wounding is still present, how long of a process this is of healing and grieving, and how grief is a necessary step in the process of healing, how you can't skip over that step. Like, as much as you really want to, and as much as I tried, you cannot skip the step of grief. And grief itself has a process that it goes through. Looking up the stages of grief is really important and helpful for us to know, and so we can catch ourselves when we're in there. And of course, the Empress is where we want to get to, right? It's like the healed heart energy. Once we've done that work to grieve and heal, we then get to sit upon our throne and claim that throne that we all rightfully have as our birthright. And, I think the Empress is about creating a legacy and being it's very Capricornian, where it's like, I am creating a legacy and I no longer am letting my emotions run the show. I'm now able to stand in my sovereignty. Doesn't mean I don't have emotions. It just means that I am so unshakably devoted to creating the life that I know I deserve, and I'm not going to settle for less than I know I deserve, and I'm not going to, let those waves of emotions take me off course. And the waves will come, the emotions will come, but we are becoming skilled sailors, and we are becoming a little bit more practiced when it comes to riding the waves and when it comes to navigating those states of being where we can catch ourselves in triggers, and we can start to employ our tools for self-soothing, and we can figure out how to self-regulate or co-regulate or whatever it is. And that's a practice, and it takes practice. It takes time. It takes devotion and dedication and continuous renewing of the intention to do so. And of course, every new moon is a time for us to set new intentions. And so, what is your intention for this final moon cycle of 2025? The one that's going to carry us into 2026. And it's going to carry us with an extremely strong sense of optimism, an extremely strong sense of wanting to be free, of wanting to make our life a movie, an adventure, of remembering that we are the main character of our experience. And so it's not up to anyone else to make decisions for us. It's not up to cultural norms. It's not up to the status quo. It's not up to our boss. It's not up to our parents. It's not even up to our religion what we now get to decide what we're doing with our lives. So let's continue to move through this together. One last thing I think I really do need to say before I leave you is the grand water trine that we've been working with all of November and a little bit of October is still in play. It's dissipating, but it's going to be reactivated. And right now, it's still highlighting Black Moon Lilith at 29 degrees of Scorpio, Neptune and Saturn at 29 and 25 degrees Pisces, and then Jupiter is the one that's kind of slipping off there because it's retrograde now, in Cancer at 22 degrees. So 22 degrees and 29 degrees, they're a little off with the orb, but if you want to give it a bigger orb, then you can say that that is still a trine, and you can say that, you know, perhaps that's the grief, and that's the letting go process, is like the washing clean, that the water trine came through and washed us clean. But that Black Moon Lilith is still hanging on 29 degrees of Scorpio, and she is pissed, and she has been wronged, and she has been betrayed, and she has been told to shut up and sit down, and she has been told that things are fair when they're not fair, and she is fucking tired of it. So let her find the freedom that she needs through the Sagittarius new moon, because she is desperate to be liberated, and she is desperate for equality, and she is desperate for justice, and she is desperate for truth to prevail. And with that, I'll go ahead and say this is the new moon where we bring our spark back, and we rise from the ashes, and we remember what life is worth living for, and remember what brings shivers down our spine and brings goosebumps, and remember what it is that we came here to do, and do it with tenacity and focus and passion and a fiery sense of determination. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Capricorn season is coming up, but we are going to have a Cancer full moon next full moon. So the tears might not stop for a while, guys. We got February. I'm going to keep saying that. And if we get to February and something else comes up, then we're going to move it again. And I'm not trying to do this like bait and catch thing where it's like keep pushing the goalposts and goalposts back. But we're working with the energy as it comes up. We're taking it day by day. And right now, we're going to take it to February and see what happens. So everyone have a beautiful holiday season, a beautiful new year, a beautiful time setting your intentions for this new moon cycle and for this new year. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.